A few years ago on Transgender Day Visibility, I made a video going through various transgender characters in Japanese media. Seeing as it's one of my most popular videos, I've been considering making a follow-up to it for quite some time. And today is March 31st, Transgender Day of Visibility once again. So let's take this opportunity to have a look at even more transgender and non-binary characters in Japanese media. We will be looking at fairly recent characters today, but I want to start by mentioning a character that should have been in my first video. Claude from Ikeda Ryuko's 1978 manga Claudine, which has even been released in English since my last video. Claude is a trans man from a French aristocratic family in the early 20th century. Claude is one of the first trans men to appear in a manga, and the story itself is arguably the first time a manga focused on a realistic trans narrative. Spoilers incoming here, though it might not be a surprise given Ikeda-sensei's love of tragedy. Claude falls in love with several women who reject him, leading to Claude blaming his presumed female body. He commits suicide after falling into depression, with the final narration of the manga being Claude's psychiatrist officiating Claude's transsexual diagnosis. It's a tragic tale, both in isolation and in regards to the fate many trans characters would face in the future. But now we jump forward several decades to 2015 in the manga Our Dreams at Dusk by Kamatani Yuki. The manga features several LGBT characters, including Natsuyoshi, a trans man. He's a supporting character that appears as early as the very first chapter, and that same chapter also introduces Anonymous, an ex-gender and asexual person who owns a drop-in center where most of the cast hang out. Ex-gender, if you're not aware, is a Japanese term that doesn't translate directly to non-binary, but it is an non-binary identity. Finally, the manga also has Suji, who is currently questioning their gender. The book has been localized into English, so definitely check it out if you haven't, as it's a solid in-depth look into Japan's LGBT scene. That same year, in the light novel recently turned anime So I'm a Spider, So What?, there's a trans woman named Karnatia, or Katya for short. As the series is an isekai reincarnation story, the way in which Katya came to find herself a woman is through magical contrivance, as she lived as a man before being put in the body of a cis woman.
そうそう、俺大島。びっくりだろ？生まれ変わったら女になってんの。お前大島かよ。ずいぶん可愛くなっちまったじゃねえか。前よりそっちの方がいいんじゃねえ？ひってえな。俺でも最初はずいぶんへこんだんだぞ。だろうな。俺だったらショックで自殺するかもしんねえよ。
Despite this, she embraces her new body and gender, even going so far as to refer to her past life as a different person long since dead. Another recent anime adaptation was Susukawa Rin's manga Asubi Asobase, which features a perfect example of how to not involve a trans character. Tsugumi is a trans woman and a minor character who the main characters will learn the assigned gender at birth of.
それがね、昨日の夜寝てたらね、窓の方がうるさくて。そんなことない。寝れない。ちらっと覗いたら、なんかカップルが千葉喧嘩っぽいのしてたの。一体どういうことだよ。おいおい、突然別れるとかマジ意味不明。俺お前のこと愛してんだぜ。ごめんなさい。でもこれ以上嘘つけなくて、私下にあなたと同じものついてるの。
The main characters then proceed to have a total trans panic episode about this person they barely know, and it's all presented as if it's hilarious. It's not.
やっぱ違うって。学年の一番可愛い青空つぐみちゃんじゃん。でも大地どうやって聞くの？男ですかってはっきり言える？うるさかったですか？あの騒ぎ。イエス。会話の内容聞こえましたか？オリビアなんでひよってるの？でもじゃあなんで体育の時いつもトイレで着替えるんですか？え？だってみんなの前で着替えるの恥ずかしいんだもん。かわいいキュン。うさんくさ。
花子の実動物的危機管理が発動した。
It's probably one of the most perfect examples of transphobic comedy in recent anime and manga, though transphobia was certainly not the only sensitivity issue the series had. Come 2016, we find Kanata from the video games Akiba's Beat, She's a trans woman that plays a major role in the game, and while the word transgender doesn't appear in the game itself, she's been reaffirmed as trans by the developers. In Fujimoto Tatsuki's dystopian action manga Fire Punch, there's Togata, a trans man with the power of regeneration. His power, ironically called a blessing, prevents him from going through with the gender-reaffirming surgery he wants to have. And spoiler warning again here, while Togata is a major character, he does not survive the series. Nojima from Oda Tomohito's manga Komi Can't Communicate is a non-binary supporting character who defines their gender as simply Nojima. This book has also been localized into English. Hebiso and Suzuki Suta's manga Heaven's Design Team, which was adapted into an anime this year, features Venus, a trans woman who is part of the main cast and whose trans status is just casually part of the series without any questioning. I highly recommend this anime adaptation as it is hilarious, even though I was disappointed that Venus is voiced by Kishio Daisuke, who's a cis man, though thankfully his acting approach doesn't turn her into a Okama caricature or anything of the like.
最高。雪が降ればもっとお酒が美味しくなりそうだけど。降らせようか？え、できるの？やってやって。
I want to once again highlight Konayama Kata's manga Love Me For Who I Am, which began in 2018, because it has recently begun its English release. It follows the story of Mogumo, a non-binary teenager, and the various people from the LGBT spectrum they get to know by working at Cafe Question and Otokonoko Cafe. The cafe is run by a trans woman, Satori, and another member on the staff, Mei, is also a trans woman. It's a wonderful series you should absolutely read if you haven't. And then there's Oda Eiichiro's One Piece, which certainly did not start in 2018, but did introduce the character Okiku that year. Okiku is a trans woman who stands in strong contrast to Oda's various Okama stereotypes from earlier in the series, and 2 years later the series also introduced Yamato, a trans man. I personally haven't read One Piece in many years, but I've been told that both characters have their genders fully respected by the main cast, and the localization genders them properly, uses the right pronouns and everything. The 2019 anime Carole and Tuesday features Martian androgyny, a sci-fi intersex condition that causes a person to fluctuate between biological sexes, for the lack of a better word. Two characters, Dahlia and Desmond, have Martian androgyny and are portrayed as gender fluid in conjunction with their biological status. It's another case of an anime involving fantastical contrivance to justify transness. The series also features the Mermaid Sisters, who are non-binary singers, named after how a mermaid is neither fish or human, just like they are neither men or women.
マーメイドは人間でも魚でもない。私たちも男でも女でもない。新しい人類になりたいから。マーメイドシスターズでー。Fucking bullshit, fucking bullshit, fucking bullshit, holy shit, fucking bullshit, fucking bullshit, goddamn bullshit, son of a bitch, what the hell?
Their appearance sparked debate among trans viewers, as some consider them a brilliant middle finger to gender norms, whereas others consider them ridiculous caricatures. I'm not about to dig in further into that debate right now, because that could be its own video, but I felt it deserved mention regardless. There are two non-binary characters in the visual novel Gnosia, Rakeo and Setsu. Again, I have not played this game myself, but I've been informed that Setsu is a male character and that the player can also be non-binary. That's really cool. And speaking of non-binary characters, the anime Stars Align that same year has a main character, Yu, who discovers being X-gender while learning about LGBT identities in the series itself.
母さんの友達にいてさ、見た目は男なんだけど、でも戸籍上は女の人。え、本当？いわゆる FTM かな。知ってるんだ。教えてくれたんだ、その人が。母さんの大学からの友達なんだって。でも俺にはその感じは正直言ってわからないよ。だけど俺も自分が生きている理由がわからないって時あるよ。どうして俺はこの世界にいるんだろうって感じることがあるんだ。
僕もそう思う時ある。僕は強いて言うなら X ジェンダーなんだと思う。けどそうやって分類されるのも違和感があって。でも 世の中どっちかに決めなきゃいけないことばかりだし、決めないと不便だし、僕はどうしたいんだろう、何になりたいんだろうって。
ユータだけじゃないよ。俺も同じなんだ。
I might be wrong, but I believe it's the first anime TV series to use the term X-gender, and that's a milestone in itself. Boys Run the Riot is a manga from 2020 by Gaku Keito, who himself is a trans man, and the main character Ryu is also a trans man. The book is still ongoing in Japan and will begin releasing in English by Kodansha USA later this year. Another trans man from that year is Kite from Japan Sings 2020, a modern-day anime remake of the 1973 novel Japan Sings by Komatsu Sakyo about people surviving an environmental catastrophe tearing through Japan. Popular Viking manga turned anime Vinland Saga by Yukimura Makoto has a character Cordelia, who is a trans woman. Her story is a bit unique in that while assigned male at birth, her mother raised her as a girl. As she grew older, she realized her assigned birth gender as she began to resemble her father more than her mother, but continues to identify as a woman despite life becoming much more difficult as a result. And then there's 2021, our current year. Now I debated back and forth whether I should include this next anime or not, because, once again, I could probably make an entire video about only this anime, but it wouldn't be right to not mention it at all. I'm talking about Wonder Egg Priority. This anime's broadcast ended last night, although the actual ending won't be released until June because of a variety of scheduling issues and production troubles. It's a show about child suicides and various other traumatic topics that makes up the list of content warnings you probably want to read before watching the anime itself. But it also has a 14-year-old trans man named Kaoru who appears in episode 10 wearing a transgender pride-colored jacket.
君はそれでもいいって方ね。はるかと一緒だ。はるか？女子だけど僕を愛してるって。L ってこと？違う。違うの？僕、心は男子なんだよ。
I need to mention this detail right away and provide some content warnings. We're about to talk about child suicide and child rape. Kaoru is already dead by the time we meet him. He committed suicide after having been raped by his school counselor and getting pregnant. His story is not pretty, and while he maintains a strong, colorful personality throughout our brief moments with him, I cannot in good faith point to Wonder Egg Priority as something to watch for the sake of seeing an awesome trans man because of the nature of his appearance. Now, I should also mention that Kaoru is not unique in having experienced these things. A lot of other child characters have. Again, it's the theme of the series. There's also Momoe, one of the main characters, who is heavily coded as being trans, although it's not ever actually stated, and she even gets to don Kaoru's trans-colored jacket at one point.
君は素敵な女の子だよ。あなたは勇敢な男の子。
But again, this is getting into territory that would be better left for its own video, probably after the actual last episode has released. And that's where I'm going to leave things for now. I hope that you learned about a few more new trans characters in anime, manga, novels, and video games. And, let me know if I should do more videos of just, listing out characters like this, because there's plenty more to go. And don't forget that next week, everyone's favorite undead trans girl, Lily, is back in Zombieland Saga Revenge on Crunchyroll, and I highly advise you to watch it because it's going to be awesome. I hope. I really don't want this to end up being bad because I love Zombieland Saga and I love Lily. This is why I should script the ending parts to my video, but I don't. I just ramble instead. It's actually April 1st here in Sweden already. It's not Transgender Day of Visibility, but I guess, the US time zones are the only thing that matters. Or you can see me saying that it's Transgender Day of Visibility as an April Fool's. Your choice.